Hello, everyone, and welcome to this plenary session that I'm not only very glad, but I'm all very honored to chair. As in Spain, the fight to bring justice to victims of Francoism has a name, and that is Emilio Silva. For the last 20 years, he has boosted the movement for justice and memory in this country by initiatives both as a rather private individual, but with a huge social and political impact, like his efforts to get his grandfather's remains scientifically exhumed in 2000, and also as president of the Association for the Recovery of Historical Memory. His struggle has inspired victims, activists, scholars, politicians, and citizens in general. So, Emilio, thank you very much for accepting joining us in this conference. It is a real pleasure, and we are looking forward to listening to your presentation. I take advantage to encourage the audience to write their questions in the chat throughout the whole session, so we have time to gather up them, and also that to make sure that we don't run out of time. So, Emilio, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation. And thank you very much for the invitation. I am the grandson of a missing person in Spain. My grandfather was militant of a moderate Republican Party and was killed in the year 1936. I am a journalist, and in the year 2000, I was looking for information for a report about the years after the war in Spain. And I found a man who knows the place of the grave of my grandfather. And then I wrote an article in a local newspaper with the title, "My Grandfather Also Was a Missing Person." Because in Spain, we are all the time talking about missings from another countries, but we never talk about our missing people. We have in Spain a euphemistic word for this kind of people. It's paseado. It's people who walk and never back, no? But it's a tragical euphemistic expression because hide the tragedy of thousands and thousands of Spanish families. I want to explain what happens, why Spain export justice and import impunity. No, we have at the end of the dictatorship in 1975. We have an amnesty law in 1977 with the support of the principal political parties, right parties, left parties, parties in the opposition during the Franco's regime. No, they say we have to leave the past, we have to left the justice, we have to hide the violations of human rights of our dictatorship, and we have to look at the future. No. And they respect this silence pact during a lot of years. In our parliament, they never talk about the missings, the victims, the tortured people, the people who during the 50s in Spain don't have access to the poliomyelitis vaccine because they are the children of the losers of the war, and a lot of violations of human rights. No? But when the parliament said we have juridical impunity and political impunity for the Franco's people, some people in Spain start to look for the graves and the missing people. In the north of Spain, Navarra, La Rioja, the relatives with their hands, with no archaeologists, no forensic doctors, only with love and their hands, they look for the bones of their brothers, fathers, husbands, wives, uncles, and they take all the bones from a mass grave in a ditch, they put into the cemetery. And they don't go to the justice, they don't look for the court to open a juridical process, they only want to put the bones in a dignity place, no? this movement during the end of the 70s in Spain was growing in most areas of the country. But in the in the year 1981, the 23rd of February, we have a coup d'etat. We have a leader of the Spanish army kidnapped our parliament, and he, with a gun on the hand, cried into the parliament, quiet everybody. Not only the deputies, she want to say cry to everybody. And the relatives of the missing people stop. They don't want to look for the missing people. They don't want to wake up another dictatorship, no? And then the Franco's elite get the social impunity. They have in the parliament the juridical and the political impunity, and with the coup d'etat, they have the social impunity. Nobody wants to say nothing against the Franco's elites, no? They have a lot of fear. This coup d'etat is like the, no? People segregating fear during 40 years. In one moment, look again the memory of the years of violence and fear, and they say, we don't want to talk about this past. And then our parliament, our state, start to create an idea of reconciliation and a transition to democracy without problems with it, no? In many countries, during a lot of years, in universities, in institutes, academical institutes, they say Spain have a very good transition. Without blood, without problems, they go back to democracy with no problems, no? For example, in 2000, for transitional justice, to take a lot of information about mass graves, because somebody told me they have this official narrative of the very, very good transition to democracy. And then they create a strategy, the Spanish state. And they say, we don't have problems. We have reunions with the exiles, Republican people in Mexico or Argentina, but they never meet the victims of the dictatorship in the Spanish, no? In the Spanish land. They export of normality with the past, but we have a lot of silence, a lot of problems waiting for another generation, no? For example, in the 80s, the Spanish parliament and the Spanish create a commission to know what happens with the missing Spanish people, but not in Spain, only in Argentina and Chile. They are making this strategy. They want to look for the missing Spanish people outside Spain, but we never have in 45 years of democracy after the dictatorship a commission about the more than 100,000 people missing in Spain, no? When the king or the president go to Moscow, Paris, Buenos Aires, Mexico, Santiago de Chile, they have a very happy meetings with the members of the Spanish exile, no? Are very, very... But, in Spain, still today, they have any president of our democracy have a public meeting with the victims of the dictatorship. It's not because it's very, very cheap create this moment, but in 5 years they never want to create this public event, no, with the victims. They start out, I was talking about, and also start to win the process of the application of the universal justice, no? For example, the Spanish justice detained Pinochet in London in 1998. No, it's a great victory of the Spanish justice, of the Spanish courts, but they never opened the door for the victims of the Franco's regime. We are the winners. Justice. We have in Spain juridical cases about Argentina, Chile, Rwanda, Guatemala. Some months ago, we have a process with El Salvador, but always we look for the justice so from Spain, no? Juridical power don't know about the Franco's crimes. And then in 2000, 25 years after the political silence, 25 years with a lot of victims waiting for the state, they die in silence, waiting for something. My grandmother in 98 years before the grave of my grandfather. I think the grandchildren start to look for the grandparents, no? And then we broke the silence pact, and we go to talk about this question not with political discussions, no? The people of Franco kill more people, the other people kill people. At the beginning, we start to work this question in the human rights, no? In 2002, I take my car in Madrid. I went to Geneva in Switzerland, and I take the histories of 64 missing persons in the Spanish dictatorship, because we want to say to the High Commission of Human Rights that Spain have a lot of missing people, and our government do nothing to look for them, no? And then we start to open more graves with a lot of volunteers. In 20 years, we have volunteers more than 20 nationalities, no? And we start to break the silence, no? I think the mass grave is the metaphor, the perfect metaphor of a mouth. The process of the memory is a great conversation. It's a great conversation with the past to change the meaning of the past and the present, no? Silence in some days after recovery the bones of my October 2000, I see one day the death day in Spain, the mausoleum, the dictatorship in the night with a lot of light, like the Hollywood mountain. And I was thinking, in my country, 30 people who fight for public and local school in a small village northwest of Spain are in a ditch during 25 years, democracy, no? And the responsibles are in a big monument, in a big public monument, carrying with the taxes of his victims still, no? Like the start of our democracy, no? And the question for me was very, very hard, but my meaning of the past, my meaning of the Valley of the Fallen, the place during a lot of years, the body of the dictator Francisco Franco, changed because I was in a conversation in a grave with the bones, with the holes in the head, with the broken bones before they die, no? With some signals, objects, glasses or earrings or everything. And this conversation with the grave of my grandfather changed for me the meaning to look my country, no? This process, when we opened this process in the beginning of this century, in the year 2007, our government say, I want to create an historical memory law, no? I have to do something, no? Because still in the first years of the century, we opened the graves with volunteers, with no money, with a lot of solidarity to give food for the anthropologists and archaeologists and other volunteers. And our country, our government say, we have to do something. And they decide to create a historical memory law. No? But this memory law don't take the responsibility to look for the missing people for the government. No, they say, we only have to facilitate the question. No, we have to left the social organizations looking for the missings. Perhaps we give some money to help, but this is not our responsibility. No, and then when we know the text of the historical memory law, a group of associations decide to go to the national court to say the Spanish justice have to look for these people, have to know what happens with these people, and is the responsibility of the powers of my state. No? And then in 2008, the National Audience opened a juridical process with the Franco's crimes. No, the judge Baltasar Garzón tried to know what happens, to look for responsibilities, and now he is outside the court because was a crime trying to know the Franco's crimes. No, and then he had an internal juridical process, and now he's not in the Spanish court. He's outside, no? And then we start to ask, because when we found a grave, we found bounds with signals of violence, we go to the court or the police and we say, there are human bones with violent signals in this place. With the Spanish law, the court have the obligation to go there. But in the 98% of the graves, they never go, including they never answer. When we go to the court and we say there is a grave with missing people, we listen our voice in front. The justice never say nothing, and they have the obligation to go there to take information and after to decide. Perhaps they say it's a common crime, and in 20 years we have the prescription, and it's not important for my court, no? Or perhaps they say my country recognized the Convention Against Missing People, and I have to open a process to know what happens. Who are these people? Who are the killers, and what happens there? And create a reparation for their relatives, no? But they never go. And one day we went to the government of the Spanish courts, the organization of all the courts in Spain, and we say some courts in the country never go to the graves to look for information, and the law who say what is the work of a judge say they have the obligation, and the government of our court say we don't have problems with the interpretation of the laws in the Spanish court. It's not no problem. But we are not talking about interpretations. We are talking about obligation. And when a judge say, I don't want to go to the grave, this is a prevarication. The law say they have to go there, no? And we have a lot of impunity everywhere in Spain, no? And in the year 2010, we decide to go to Argentina. We say, okay, Spain, during a lot of years, are the Spanish courts open process against Pinochet, Videla, Rios Montt, and we want to say, I will go to Argentina, I will put a querella in Argentina, and I want to wait what happens. If the Argentine court say to Spain, I have the principle of universal justice, and I can try to know what happens with the Franco's crimes, no? And in the 2010, the Argentine court start to work with the Spanish crimes, with the universal justice. The universal justice is in the Argentine constitution at the end of the 19th century, no? And they say, okay, I want to back the work of the Spanish court with my dictatorship in Argentina. Now I will go to open a process with the Spanish crimes in the Franco's dictatorship, no? At the beginning of this process, the Spanish government tried to put problems, no, at the beginning. And I think perhaps we can think that universal justice to Argentina, to Chile, to Guatemala is like the metropolis with the ex-colonia, saying you have to clean your country, but you cannot clean my country, no? Always Spain go out to look for justice and go into to support the impunity, no? The impunity. We have the impunity in everywhere. In the scholar books, they don't talk about these questions. The missing people are missing everywhere in Spain, no? In these years, we opened more than 200 graves. We have some autonomous governments with responsibility to look for the missing persons. But we don't have any door to go into the court to look for real justice. In Spain, we have symbolic justice and other kinds of justice, justice without justice, no? And we have still today the Amnesty Law, no? Two reports of the United Nations in 2014, one of the group of disappearance of the High Commission of Human Rights and the Special Rapporteur for the Truth, the Justice and Reparation, say to Spain, you have the obligation to open the courts for these crimes. You have to finish the discrimination between different kinds of victims. In Spain, the victims of the terrorism have all the support of all the powers of the Spanish states, no? And there are another kind of victims, the victims of the dictatorship. There are a second-class victims or third-class victims. They don't have rights. They don't have courts. They never have a meeting with a president of our government in 45 years. For them, our government produce ignorance. The government don't want to know nothing about these people, no? Nothing about these people. The memory law doesn't have an answer for all the questions, no? But we grow like a social movement, and in Spain appears the people, political prisoners at the end of the dictatorship, the people with the kidnapped babies, the people with the problem of the poliomyelitic vacuums, the homosexual people, because we have a concentration camp for the homosexual people, and we have psychiatrist buildings for the lesbians. We have a lot of political and moral repression, no? And a lot of these people was in silence during years, and in the last years, they start to come to the conversation of the memory, no? And now we know more things about the crimes of the Franco's regime. No, for me, in 2003, I can put the bonds of my grandfather with the bonds of my grandmother. She died 2 years before, but some years before she died, she bought a place in a new cemetery on the village, and he put the surnames of my grandfather. 52 years after, he was waiting for his body, but never any institution in Spain during 22 years she was alive after the Franco's death. Nobody say, do you need help to look for your husband or look for justice for you? No. And a lot of people in Spain died during those years, people fighting against the Franco's regime, people waiting for the justice, for a political recognition of our democracy. And they die waiting and waiting and waiting. And when finished the Spanish Civil War, Franco created a law of repression, no, a law of political responsibilities. In one part of the law, he created a new crime. The name of the crime is signification. In Spain, the signification is the process when you show publicly your political ideas, no? And then the people who support the Second Republic in Spain are criminal because they have signification. And then thousands and thousands and thousands of families have to be insignificant, with no signification. They have to create another identity to change the problem with the regime. No, in Spain, still today, sometimes I have meetings with relatives of the missing people, and they talk something about their relatives, their families, and they say, my mother say I talk only about my grandfather, and I have to stay in the insignification. No, and insignification, empty of meaning. There are still today a lot of people in Spain. They are empty of political meaning, and the political institutions don't recover for them the political meaning. And still today in Spain, 45 years after the Franco's regime, you can see the fear. The fear have a very long life when the politicians are in a pact of silence. And now we are, at this time, we are looking for a grave in a small village, 90 kilometers from Madrid, Los Terralbos. One group of the association is looking for from 5 days in land, the place of the grave. There are people in the village who knows exactly the place, but they don't to talk with us because they have fear, no? And the fear is very easy to kill with political facts, no? Because this relative has the imagination, they are controlled by the Franco's people still today, because the Spanish democracy never came and keep out this idea of the Franco's people and saying, you have the support of our democratic government. You can talk about the past. You can go to the place of the grave and say the grave is here, because you don't have problem if you go there, because I protect you. But they never feel the protection of the Spanish government, no? And it's very, very hard for them still today. If we go to a small village and we ask about the grave, we know sometimes the place of the grave, but we want to look for information with the neighbors. And if you ask something about the war, automatically, the most of the people look at the window to see if the window is closed or the window is open. And it's indifferent for them if it's closed or it's open. They lower the voice to talk about the question. And I'm talking in the 21st century, 2021. And still today, the fear is in the bones of the alive people in our country, because the Justin is looking for to another place. He's looking for too far from here, no? Not the victims, the Spanish victims. They never have the support of the government and the powers of the state, no? And it's very, very difficult for them to recover the meaning, to significance again in the present, no? Because the Spanish dictatorship was very, very, very long, 2 generations under the fear. Like my father with 10 years old, he saw disappear his father. He left the school with 10 years old. He crossed the door of the classroom and he never back again to the classroom. No, a lot of people have to left the school to work because many of the families of the missing were robbery. My family have some. My grandfather had a big store in the 30s. He was living in Argentina and New York, and he was a business. And the killers of my grandfather, like to a lot of families, they take all the properties. No, we have physical repression, psychological repression, political repression, economical repression, but never a court opened the door for one of these victims. No. Now in Argentina, we have a process, a juridical process against the Franco's crime, very slow. No, we have alive some members of the Franco's governments, but for example, in Spain, 5 years ago, we discovered that we have policemen from the Franco's regime with special pensions. Still today, we are, with my taxes, I am paying torturators from the Franco's regime, because at the end of the dictatorship and at the beginning of the democracy, they have official medals with special pensions. And the democracy don't look for the missing people, and they have prize every month in the pension for policemen from the Franco's regime. This is my country. This is my country. This is the injustice in our country, and we want to fight against these situations, no? Because it's very, very sad. 1 month ago, we opened a grave in the north of Spain, in Asturias. A lot of rain, the land was very, very awful, and arrived a woman of 95 years, Maria, looking for his father. He has the luck to be alive with 95 years, no? But he lives in democracy 45 years, and he never have any help of any institution, no? And now in Spain, we are debating. Yesterday, the Spanish government create a new text of a democratic memory law. They changed the name. We have some debate in Spain about the expression historical memory. No, a lot of historians say historic memory and history, they are not contact. But for me, it's very easy to explain why we use historical memory. The graves we found and we look for are not in any document, are only in the memory of somebody who say around here, in this ditch, near this tree, like the grave of my grandfather, and it's the contact of the history and the memory. We are talking about history facts. These crimes are part of our history, and we only can find the place of the grave, memory of somebody who want to talk about, no? And this law in Spain, this new law of democratic memory, don't want to open the court from the victim. It's a law who talk about justice without justice. It's a law who talk about truth without truth, because they want to create a great report about the victims, but they don't want to create any report about the perpetrators. No, we only want to talk about victims, and we broke the context. Only have a whole to look at the victims, and we forget the perpetrators. We forget the Spanish elite with a lot of crimes on their backs, properties from the victims, and companies who used political slaves during the 50s and the 60s in Spain. A lot of perpetrators, but the new law don't talk about the perpetrators. It's truth, it's a small truth, it's a truth without truth, no? And they want to learn in the Spanish schools the history of the people who fight for build the democracy. Okay, very, very good. We fight during a lot of years to put the story of these people in the scholar books, but also we want the history of the Spanish fascism. We want to know and learn what happens with the people building democracy and what happens with the people destroying democracy, because it's all the history is a right for the new citizens, and it's important to make a hard democracy, a better democracy culture, no? But they only want to see the victims, the builders of democracy, and not the destroyers of democracy. In 2007, in the New York City, the New York University created an exhibition about the people in New York who support the Spanish Republic during the war. No, the title of the exhibition in New York was "Faces Fascism, Confront Fascism, New York and the Spanish Civil War." Okay, they say it's the people who support the official government of the Republic. No, this exhibition came to Spain in 2008, and in the travel, the exhibition lost one word. The lost word was fascism. The title in Spain was only New York and the Spanish Civil War. Okay, it's not the difference. Perhaps it's people from New York who support Franco, or people from New York who support the Second Republic. But we have to hide. We have to hide the word fascism, and we have to hide in this new law the history of our, and we wait for the parliament process of the law that will be better, and now the government want, for example, to give money for open some graves, no, subventions, like scholarships, no? They want to give some money to some groups. We create a competition between groups of relatives to say, you go out and I take the money of the government to look for the missing, to look for the grave. It's an aberration. It's very, very hard against human rights. This competition between relatives of missing persons, no? It's like if I have a terrorist attempt and I go there and there are 100 people dead, and I say, I only want to repair 40 people. The other 60 is not my problem, no? It's in the new law. We have to change this question, no? because the human rights have to be universals, and you cannot put some money, and when you spend the money and for nobody more. The missing of the relatives in Spain never received any euro from the government, any euro, never. In the law, there's no reparation. Another kind of justice. It's a justice into the impunity. Yes, they are moving into the a square of impunity. They are moving into, no, but they don't break and open the justice for the victims, no. And I want to finish with two pictures of one Spanish man who died in the exile in Argentina. And during the Spanish War, he drew some pictures about the repression and the war. No, in a place, in many parts of Spain, we look for the mass graves. Never was a war. Never was two armies confronting. No, only repression. When Castelao is the man from the northwest of Spain, Galicia, he was drawing and thinking about the war. And there are two pictures very important for us. In one of them, you can see a dead man in the floor with some blood in the floor, and two small children, very sad, is looking at the dead man. And there is a sentence in the draw who say, the last lesson of the teacher. The last lesson of the teacher is so his death. Is his last lesson. When we open a grave and we saw the death of the missings, they are learning what happens in our country. They are teachers for us. And the other picture is a group of civilians in a small village. They are putting dead bodies in a grave. In one part of the picture, you can see crutches. The cemetery so far, they are in the countryside, open a grave, put bodies of civilians killed by the fascist people. And the sentence in the picture say, they don't bury dead bodies, they bury seeds. And when we saw this picture, for us was very impressionant, because in the graves are the seeds growing to create a better democracy in our country. And I think we have a death, another death with the dead people, because his suffering is food from the Spanish democracy culture. We have to create with these seeds a better culture of human rights. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this great presentation. I completely share a general comment on the chat, which is that it has been a very moving account. And there are several questions for you in the chat. So I will follow a bit of an order, but we don't have so much time. The first question has to do with the law on historical memory, as it couldn't be otherwise. The Spanish government passed it yesterday. And Maria C. wants to know your assessment. She's asking, what essential factors do you think should be incorporated? You have already mentioned the lack of action, state action regarding missing people, the lack of access to justice, or the fact that it doesn't tell the truth about perpetrators. Anything else you want to add?
And perhaps say finish to the Amnesty Law, no? Is the recommendation of the High Commission, the Human Rights reports about Spain. You have to broke the amnesty law, no, because all the amnesty laws are amnesties for the perpetrators, no. In Spain, for example, they destroyed thousands and thousands of documents after the Franco's dictatorship to hide the crimes, no. Another archivistic or amnesty, no. And I think they have to break the amnesty law and open the courts to the crimes, economical crime, missing people, people tortured. I think is very, 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 very important. And I think I was talking about this question. It's very important to learn the history of the Spanish fascism. They kill a lot of people. They were very violent to get the power, and a democracy can't hide this part of the history, no, because it's another present for the perpetrators, and they have to break the present of the amnesty and open the courts. The justice is the better politics about violations of human rights, no, more than the laws, the work of the justice.
Now that you mention education as well, I will connect another question. Zaira Arawet is asking, what's the role, or what has been the role of associations in the design of the new democratic memory law? And in what ways? And she's also asking about the transmission. What are your thoughts regarding the history transmission in schools?
Our participation in the law doesn't exist. We send a report to our government to say our opinion of the politics of the new government. We have a new government, a new president from 2018 to today, the new president Pedro Sanchez. We gave on his hand a report with our ideas about the politics about memory, but in the law, our recommendation are outside the law. No, today, perhaps in the parliament process, will be better. No, the law in the schools is very, very difficult. No, sometimes some teachers with responsibility, and they know I have to teach, especially this moment of our history, no? And it depends of the different parts of Spain, no? For example, in Catalonia, I talk with a lot of students of the last years after the university, because they have to be during 2 years making a research, and some of them choose the question of the historical memory. But I live in Madrid, and for me it's very difficult to go to a scholar place to talk about the association, because they say you will have adoctrination, no? And they say we prefer talk about another question. For a victim of the terrorism, it's very easy to go to a Spanish school. For a victim of the Franco's regime, it's not easy, no? The question is completely different. Entonces, we have, from 3 years ago, we have a Catholic book, of a scholar book, with 1 page about the graves. And for me, it was very, was a friend teacher of history sent me an email with the picture of this page, no? And I think, oh, for me, the best homage, the best recognition for these people who create the first Spanish democracy in the Second Republic and who fight against the dictatorship, the best recognition is in a scholar book. It's not a monument, it's in a scholar book. It's a paragraph in a scholar book telling the real history of our country, no? And I think this law say we want to put new information in the scholar books, but they only want to put information about the people building democracy, no? We have a very important woman in Spain, Clara Campoamor. She represents the woman who fought for the first democratic elections in Spain in 1943. And I hope the children study the history of Clara Campoamor, but I also was the people study the history of Queipo de Llano. It's one fascist military who say in radio speeches to his soldiers, you have to make violations of women, of the rights. They have to learn the real meaning of a man, no? And I think we have to have also this history in the scholar books, not only the history of the good people creating new rights, no? Because the impunity in the law, we have also this question of the impunity, a scholar impunity.
Thank you, Emilio. I'm going to put two questions together. Nates was asking whether Spain confronts any of our painful history. And Leslie Ann Daniels says that these are very brave investigations, and she wonders, beyond the impact on the individuals, what do you think would be the impact on society?
Well, I think the graves are mirrors, and the society needs to look itself. No, I think when we open the first grave, we discuss about what happens with the pictures of the bones. No, perhaps the newspapers don't have good information with the bones, the broken bones. We are discussing. No, we have a discussion about what we do with the images of the bone, no, of the grave. And I think it's very, very important to see the crimes. No, it's very, very important. I was talking about the fight for memory is the fight for the meaning. What meaning have our past? No, the conservative parties say to us every day, you want to change the history, you want to win war you lose, etc., etc. No, but no, we want a democratic meaning of the past. It's our word, and have to be the word of the society. The day before yesterday, an ex-minister of our government say that the coup d'etat of Franco in 1936 is not a coup d'etat. It's only a movement to recover the order and have a better country, no? The day before yesterday. And 2 meters from them is the leader of the Conservative Party in Spain. They say, keep silence, no? I think at the first, the society have to learn, no? And I think is the most important thing. And I think when I was talking about the grave like a mouth, I think we create a small conversation at the beginning in small villages, and now the conversation is in the media, in the parliament, in the autonomous governments, and the conversation. One Spanish sociologist, Jesus Ibáñez, used to say that a revolution is a great conversation. No? And I think this growing of the conversation is a social change. No, because for example, I can go today with a conservative newspaper in Spain, ABC, and I can put to look for information Franco's crimes, and after 2006. I have news with the expression Franco's times. Before, they never talked about Franco's crime. And I think it's a social changing, no? And for us are very, very important, because we, for example, feel the relax in the new exhumations that the exhumations 15 or 18 years before. The society learned. They are making exhumations and nobody killed them and nobody attacked. And there are people we fear, but there are people with more confidence, no? And I think it's the learning of the Spanish society, no? But the best learning for me is a sentence in a court, always, no? Always is the best social process, no? See in a court the perpetrators, the victims, listen the victims in a court, not in only in a documentary, no, in the place of the justice. And I think it's very, very difficult for us, but we are all the time working and waiting. Perhaps one day a small door in a small court open, just this moment, and this moment grow, like in Argentina, for example.
Thank you, Emilio. More questions? I think I'm going to connect to more. Hilly Mudrik wanted to know about the international community's role in this endeavor. Well, you have already mentioned the involvement, or you have used several UN mechanisms. There are reports by the Special Rapporteur on the promotion of truth, justice, reparation, and guarantees of non-repetition. There are reports by the Special Group on Forced Disappearances. There are reports by the Committee of Human Rights Committee, the Committee Against Torture. But she's also asking whether you have tried the International Committee of the Red Cross.
We have some contact with the International Committee of Red Cross. We change information about the DNA testings. We use a informatic program of the committee, but they don't want to come to Spain. No, for us sometimes it's very difficult. We don't have an office of the association. Sometimes came to Madrid people from Latin America, and I have meetings with them in my house or in a bar. No, and it's very interesting because we have a very few support from international organizations, because we are in Europe, and nobody wants to say to Europe, you have problems with human rights, like Latin America or Asia or Africa. No, some strong organizations came to Spain to study the possibility to create an office in Spain about the Franco's crimes and this process, and they go back again because the people who support with money this project don't say, I don't want to support projects in the European Union. No, and we are poorest than organization in countries with worst economical situations. No, because nobody wants to help these associations in Europe. No, only if you are in the anti-communist countries, you have support from the European Parliament, from big organizations, but in Spain we don't have the support of a union of electricians from Noruega. It's the only international organization who support. He sent some money every year to open a mass grave. They are electricians, but not as a human rights organization. No? And I think sometimes the big organizations of human rights have conflicts to go to Europe, to say to a Europe country, you have a lot of missing people. In Spain, we have the names of 140,000 people. And they are waiting in all the parts of our country. No? And then we don't have any support. Also, we have support of the Argentine Forensic Group. Yes, they made some DNA tests free for us. We sent to Argentina, and they back the information about DNA testing. Is the support of one of these groups, but the big organization who support organization in all the countries of Latin America never came to Spain to say to Spanish government, you are the union of the human rights. You have problems, human rights. I think there is a conflict with some organization with these questions.
We are beginning to run out of time. We will have 5 extra minutes, but there are still some questions. There is a question by a person a Daga person from the Central Highlands of Vietnam, who had some relatives and family members killed in the jungle when the fall of South Vietnam, and this person is asking, how can we get help to list them in the history, to be written and keep them in memory? Maybe they should get in touch with you to get a detailed trace of how you have developed your strategy through these 20 years.
Well, I think we recover many people to the history, no? People who were outside our history, no? I think, for example, in internet, you have a lot of opportunities to put information. There now is growing a wiki memoria, for example, and a human rights wiki in some countries, no? And I think it's an interesting project. But I think I always use the idea of the conversation. No, you have to start the conversation, and these names have to be in the conversation. No, for example, during some years we tried with university in Madrid to create a group to tape testimonies of the victims. No, and the university say yes. I want to help you. And they never help us. And now, if you go to Google and you put oral history archive, Spanish Civil War, University of San Diego, California, you can go to see a lot of testimonies of people who doctoral students came during 3 years to Spain to record the testimonies and to put the testimonies there. No, and I think we have a tool in internet to, for us, without internet, the world was during 20 years very, very, very difficult, no? Because every day we receive emails of relatives, everything. I open the mail of the association and I have, now we have the grandchildren, no? In Argentina, they have the children and the mothers and the grandmothers. We have here the grandchildren, and now we have the grandchildren looking for grandparents. No, but I think this tool, internet, is a very, very good opportunity to denunciate things about violations of human rights and to put the names in a place of our history. I learned questions about human rights. I am journalist with a personal computer in my legs. I contact with the group of missing people in United Nations in Geneva. I learn a lot of things and I start to fight with a small computer. No?
Thank you, Emilio. We are running out of time. There are still many questions on the chat. Maybe we can try to answer them throughout the conference. There are questions on how to deal with fear in Spanish society. There are questions about in which point the Spanish lawsuit or the lawsuit in Argentina is. It's in process. There are questions regarding the transfer of children from the losers to the vanquishers, and yes, indeed, there was that transfer, and many children have lost their identity. I'm going very fast. There is a question about
the Argentine process is very slowly. The judge some months ago make an interview with a minister of the Franco's regime and the transition, Rodolfo Martín Villa, waiting for the result of this interrogatorio, que no sé cómo se dice, perdón, this questionnaire from the court. We have kidnapped children for the winners. We have an important psychiatrist in Spain who researched about the Marxist gene, because he decided, an official psychiatrist of the Franco's army, he decided that exists a Marxist gene in some people who made the degeneration of the Spanish people, no? And he decided to take the children of the woman in political prisons and take the children and put the children with Catholic families, with good families. And I don't have time, but we have a web page, is memoriahistórica.org, memoriahistórica.org. In this web page, everybody want to contact with us. I will be very grateful, I don't know the word, to answer, to take information about everything we do. We have a lot of reports, a lot of information. And I want to say thank you for you, because for me, it's very important to be here. It's very important give voice to all the families in Spain, all the families looking for in any parts some small piece of justice, no? And for me, it's very emotional to talk in the chat, people asking about Armenia, Argentina, Spain, and I think this is a universal. We are looking for the real universal justice, no? And I want to say thank you very much.
Thank you very much to you, Emilio. Mel O'Brien has already written typed the address of the association on the chat. She has also made a nice comment that I will transmit to you afterwards.
Okay.
And it has been a real pleasure to have you here and to listen to your story. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you to all the audience as well for the very interesting questions and following the presentation. And let's continue with our conference, as we now have a lot to discuss. Okay, goodbye.